Welcome back to the Becoming Mama podcast, where two long-lost best friends discuss all things motherhood. I'm Sam, your host for All Things Matrescence, and I'm here with my co-host, Emmy.
Hello!
And we are joined today by Nea Clare, who is a mindset coach and spiritual channel. And she is here today for a special Witch in the Woo episode, where we're going to talk all about her gift, all about what that is like for her. And then at the end, she's going to do a little reading for us. So this is very exciting. I mean, I have been like buzzing about this all morning.
Good.
Really for weeks, actually.
Well, I'm
That's
excited too. I've been buzzing too, so it's good.
Yay, that's awesome. So, Emmy, do you want to be the bearer of bad news?
Yeah, we're not going to do our wins and losses today. We're not going to dive into that because we feel like we want to give all of the time over to Nea and all of the fun that this is going to be.
I agree. So, if you want us to double up next week, we can, but I don't think we will.
Whole episode of wins and losses.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're just going to jump into it. Are you ready, Nea?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so our first question, I was going to ask you to tell us about yourself, but I really feel like the right wording here is like describe yourself. You're from what I know of you, you're such a multifaceted person. So can you just give us the TLDR description?
Yes, I will do my darndest. So, and that's such a good question. Describe yourself. It's like, where do I begin?
Yeah.
So really, I think at the core of who I am is really present with people. And I spend a lot of my time and energy in all aspects of my life cultivating presence. I don't know that I would have said that 2 years ago, but COVID really shifted from working to who am I and how do I want to be in the world? And so I'm a mom. I'm a mom of a 14-year-old and a surprise 5-year-old. She took us by very big surprise. Yay. And I have been running my own business for the last, 5, almost 6 years, which kind of blows me away. It was longer than that, but I've been on my own for that long. And I do coaching and I work primarily with women, although men pop in. And I do a lot of work around who are you becoming? And whether it's in your business or in your personal life and who you are, a lot of times we spend time on creating a vision, creating what we want, and miss how do we get there? Like, how do I get ready to be that person along the way? And the intuitive piece, the channeling, which we'll get into a lot more, rides alongside everything I do. It's really integrated into who I am today. It's not something I spend time turning on and off. And it's really about trusting myself and trusting my own knowing so that I can help others by modeling that with them and helping them get to trusting their own knowing.
I think that was so beautiful. And I think one thing I'll mention is that on this show, we talk a lot about that gap between the mom you are and the mom you want to be, or the way you want your life to feel and the experience you want to have as a mother. And I think guidance from someone like you and support from someone like you just fits that mold perfectly, because sometimes there truly is this full transition between that person we are and that person we want to become. And sometimes there's such unanswered questions that hang in that balance. And so guidance from someone with your perspective can be really helpful.
Thank you. And it is, we're a culture that when we get something in our mind, we want it right then. So we get very impatient. We think, well, I'll just release all my past trauma. I'll just release all my stress. I'll just do all this. And the hard part is that we make it a short-term fix on that, a short-term boost, but then comes I don't know how to be who I want to be. And how does that affect my life? And then the other bigger question is who I want to be realistic? Is it reasonable? And is it even truly what I want, or is it what I think I should want? So there's a lot of undoing that occurs in those conversations. And it's really funny because it does come, like so much of what I do comes from doing the spiritual work in my own self, because I didn't want it. I didn't want any of it. And so how do you step into something that you're like, well, this wasn't on my big vision board of my life, and how do I welcome it and have a relationship with it? So
that's fascinating. And I will say I know Nea because we had worked together in the past, and I told the story of the reading that you gave me on our first Witch in the Woo with where my grandparents came through, and it was like the craziest experience ever. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, definitely listen to that story. But we worked together then in a coaching capacity after that, and you did a lot of the work for me that was, what do you want? Like that was a huge light bulb moment for me, that maybe my whole life it's never been what do you truly want, or it's what appearance do you want to give to the world, or what do you think you're supposed to want. And that was a huge thing. And second, with the thought of learning how to tune into yourself and trusting your inner knowing, that's another thing we talk about a lot in our talk around motherhood, because so much of motherhood now is all those mother shoulds that we've talked about before, of like all the things you're supposed to do and all the expectations, that our inner knowing gets really quieted, if not goes away completely. And so modeling that is so important. You are so multidimensional. You're such a fascinating person, but we are going to focus on your gift mostly today. So can we dive into that?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Okay. So you said you were resistant to this. When did it first show up for you?
And I think this is so perfect that we're talking about it on this podcast, because it showed up about a year after my son was born. So 13 years. Now, here's what I will say about that. I think it was around, in hindsight, a lot longer. But where I recognized it and started to experience it was about a year after he was born. And it started with a Reiki session that I had. I went, and so energy healing, for those who might not know what Reiki is, I went to a chiropractor, and there was a person there that I kept thinking, gosh, I really want to get a session with her. And I did. And I was on the table, and I had what I would call I'll call it a spiritual experience. Some people, these spiritual awakening moments. I was laying on the table, and this voice from inside of me, very deep, very clear voice, said, I know this. I know how to do this. I know all this. And so the next thing I know, I enjoyed my session, but like 2 weeks later, I signed up to be in Reiki 1, and I started learning Reiki, and that set me off on a journey that it was in the Reiki practice sessions with other Reiki practitioners where we would work on each other. And believe it or not, I was very quiet at the time. I did not say what was my experience was, because I was like, this is just weird. It's weird. I like it, but it's weird. That I started to realize I was tuning into things and having an experience. And it scared me. It shook me, because that was messing with my path. I was going to be an executive coach. I had like my career mapped out. I was going a very clear direction. And all of this weird woo stuff, I was like, I don't know. Am I going to have to wear crystals and start wearing patchouli? I'm kidding. But these were the thoughts going on in the back of my head. And then about a year or two, I want to say it was like a year after that. So it was, let's see, that would have been 2011. Yeah. That I started to have dreams where I was being visited by angels, or what appeared to be angels to me at the time, saying, we really want you to start channeling. And I was like, no, now we've crossed into like a new level of weird that I am unwilling to do. And I was familiar with channeling because my mom had done it when I was growing up. She had taken classes and done that. And it always seemed kind of weird to me, but the dreams kept coming. And I ended up I gathered the group of people that I was doing the Reiki shares with. So these are all Reiki practitioners, and said, hey, can you come early? Because I want to try that. I want to see, like, can I really do that? What is this? And I don't even know how I knew what I was doing. I just sat down, and next thing I know, I'm out of my body, and they're speaking through me. And what I had hoped would happen is that everyone in the room would be like, yeah, that's great, Nea, but don't leave your day job. That's the response I was hoping for. And I came back into my body, and they were like, you have to do this. This needs to be what you're doing. And like, it just shook me so hard that it still was another 6 months before I took a step into that. And ever since then, I've just been doing that.
That's wow.
What I think is so interesting is anytime you hear these stories of people who found kind of like their divine path or the path that they're truly meant for, their life's purpose, it's almost like you just keep falling into it. Like, you're like, oh, I'm going to gather this group of people and just see. And then you're like, oh, yes. Like the universe just keeps giving you yeses. And
Yeah.
I love your story. It's so powerful.
Yeses when you really want no's. I really want you to slam the door. I really want you to step on my toes or tell me that I'm out of my darn mind. That's what I wanted. And
But I would
It's also
almost
so
imagine
cool.
that the internal conflict that you would have experienced by continuing to say no would have been even more uncomfortable than saying yes to something that felt weird or different.
I think that's probably true. I
Yeah.
don't think it was going away. And I think my curiosity, to be honest with you, it was probably my curiosity about what the heck is this? And it felt natural and it felt good. And the experience people had was so profound that I was like, okay, let's just see. So, and ever since then, it's been kind of just a continued unfolding.
Can you explain like what it feels like?
Oh, that's a great question. So for me, it's really easy for me. I will just say it that way. Like it's almost like a non-experience. And so what happens is that it's as I'm in my body and getting ready, I don't go into a big trance. I don't do a lot of preparation. It's like falling outside of myself, falling back away from myself. And then I feel them kind of come in as I leave. And when I say leave, that's a weird experience too. Does that mean like my soul is gone? What does that mean? The way I can best describe it is that it's like my conscious self is out so that these entities, and we'll call them I'm going to say it this way. It's really about a collective consciousness. It's more like a bigger consciousness coming in, and they utilize my physical form, my voice box, my arms. Sometimes my eyes are open. It doesn't happen all the time. And sometimes I stand up. Sometimes I move around. They use this whole body to move around, and I think for me, I'm not off learning things because that I just don't feel like I just feel like it's like time for me to be just still. Like I'm really like I don't really think about what I'm doing. I'm very far away. There are times where I feel like I'm pulled in closer to the conversation. And sometimes it's because it's for me. The message, like, you need to hear this. Like, I get pulled in closer. Sometimes it's because there's something I need to be aware of for support. And what's really interesting that I've noticed in the last 2 years is that when I am coming in close, what I hear, what Nea's consciousness hears of the situation is not at all what anyone else is hearing. So it's like I'm almost getting like a different message. And I'll go back and listen. And while things sound familiar, what I took away from it is not at all what's playing on the recording. So I always record the session. So it's like, okay, like I can't explain this. So, yeah. So
that was going to be my question. When you're not always pulled in, like, do you hear what you're saying? Are you aware of what you're saying? But that sounds like that's not the case always.
No, but when I started, I felt I was really nervous. I didn't want to screw anybody up. You know, I was like, what if something happens? I had enough. I worked in corporate compliance and ethics. So I worked in a corporate environment where I'm like, you know, you really have to think about the impact that can happen. And it took a long time for me to trust the process because there really wasn't, I didn't have a handbook or anything that's like, hey, here's how to do this. So a lot of it was trial and error. And, but over time, I've been able to let go. I used to listen to every recording, but who has time to listen to hours upon hours of recordings? After a while, I was just like, you know what? I have to trust that the message wasn't for me. It was for the group. If they have questions, I always make myself available to help clarify or to help provide context that might not make sense. But it's been easy. knock on wood or whatever. It's been very, very easy in my life. So, yeah.
What shift happened where you went from being afraid of it, hesitant, to fully leaning in and just being like, this is my gift. This is what I need to bring to people?
Well, I don't know what the exact shift was. It was probably over about 6 months. I started doing group channels, which was the request of when I was getting the visits from the angels or from these entities. It was to do group messages, because the idea is that when people come together in group, they, first of all, the whole reason for channeling, what we get messages, everybody gets messages all the time. We get like little things that come in. We're like, whoa, where did that come from? Whether it's an idea or a billboard or whatever, we get messages. So why is a channel even important? And I think part of it is human beings seeing is believing. So when you have a group of people, 2 or more that are gathered, that get a chance to witness something together, it creates a connection. Plus the messages then, it's not just a message, but it's an opportunity for them to have questions. They realize they're not alone. They usually find out that there's a theme in the questions for the group that gathers, and everyone's question answers everyone else's multi-dimensional questions. So there's a real healing and a real, like, it's more like an expanded awareness that actually has, it's instead of reading a book where you can go, well, that was neat, and I felt something. We all experience that, right? So there's something really powerful in that experience.
There's a podcast actually called, I think it's The Happiness Lab. And she did a episode on why shared experiences make us happier. Like, you don't want to go to a movie by yourself because you want to turn to the person and be like, and that's why sometimes reading a book isn't as fun, because you want to talk to somebody about it. And unless you know somebody who's reading it, you can't do that. So that makes a lot of sense just on a, research level. When you do those group readings, is it more generic messages that are coming through, or do specific entities, spirits, people come through for people in that group?
Well, when I first started, I channeled, because I didn't have a rule book and I didn't think about it. I was channeling everybody's their own guides and loved ones who'd come through, which was so exciting, but it was exhausting for me. So I was like the turnstile of these experiences. And when you have 20 people and everybody's got a different person, I was like, I remember saying, do I have to do it this way? Is this what I have to do? And they're like, well, we thought you wanted to, you can do it however you want. I'm like, okay, let's keep this easier. And so the way I like to think about it is, so I rarely now channel people's loved ones who've passed or their guides, because it's a heavier energy. And the way I describe it, which is kind of goofy, but anybody who knows me has heard this, is that it's like taking government cheese and putting it through a screen door, trying to push it through. That's what it feels like to me. Whereas when I work with the ascended masters, or literally archangels, or even collective consciousness of the planet, of humanity, that's more like a breeze going through that same screen door. So I tend to work there. It's faster, it's easier. It tends to take the personality out of the experience, or the need that we all have to be so unique, to boil it down to, maybe this is really what it's about, or maybe this will help give you insight. So I hope that answers that.
Yeah. Is that just for group sessions, or when you do one-on-one, or is it easier for you to channel?
I usually still don't channel people's loved ones, mostly because there's a lot of energy that takes for me. But I do read them. If they show up, I'm more than happy. I'm reluctant to call myself a medium. I probably, on some level, I mean, I was joking. I'm not a medium. I'm an extra large, of course, right now. So, but all of my corny mom jokes. Here we go. No, but the piece about it just takes so much energy, and it takes a longer time for them to come in and out and longer for me to recover. So if I have an hour with somebody and I can receive the information much more quickly, let's just do that.
Right.
And so sometimes I don't even fully channel one-on-one sessions.
So
like leave my body.
A question. Yep, that was going to be my question. So the difference is channeling is where you actually, that person is speaking through you, like that person's spirit is there, but just relaying a message is where you're speaking with them and then relaying the message. Yes. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yep. And I would the way I call that is like it's conscious channeling. So I'm receiving information and it's faster. And that when I came back, I was at a retreat in California. This is just random. I remember I came back and I was like, I think I can just do this without leaving my body. It was like I got information about it. I wonder if I can. Sure enough, that's what started happening. And I was doing live readings for people, and I was fully conscious. And that made the transition of moving from in person to online with my business so much easier, because when I'm out, they don't care about technology. They're connecting with you as a soul. So they're with you. They're right next to you, Sam. So I just happen to be over here relaying the information. So they're not reading the technology or paying attention to that in real time. So if we lose connection, they're still conveying a message to you. They think they are, right? Yeah. And you're looking at the screen going, Nea, click, click, click. Where are you? Yeah. So that became a barrier that got lifted for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So speaking of the retreat, did you get any formal training when you started to lean into this, or was it all just that trial and error?
It was really just trial and error. I knew I ended up connecting with the woman who taught my mom how to channel. Now, let's think about this. I was 12 and so now add 30 years to that, and that's about how old I was when, right? So I'm not going to say the words, but that's when I started this. So I connected with her. I found her on Facebook, and for my birthday that year, and this was when I was still trying to figure out if I should be doing it or not, I connected with her about it and had a reading with her. And at the end I said, hey, I have a question about all these dreams I'm having about channeling. And they're like, oh, we're so glad you asked. So I was having a conversation with the people that were visiting me in my dreams. And I was like, okay. But that, there was no formal training. I knew people who did it. I talked with some people, but I never really, I don't know how to explain it. I kind of knew that I'd just figure it out. And sometimes the way I figured it out, it wasn't great. I had some, do I need to do this? But I now know I don't. And how do I know that I don't? Because I checked in and tried something else. So it's like every so often some new level gets unlocked, if we're using the metaphor of gaming, because my son's into gaming, right? So I got somewhere I banged my head against the mushroom or hit the thing, and I got a new coin, and I'm able to access new levels or something. That's what it feels like. But it's all, as Emmy said earlier, it's just like me stumbling around, figuring it out as I go.
That's so cool.
It keeps me humble, I suppose.
Big in your britches, be like, I got all these spirits behind me.
Let me tell you how to, because I'm like, I don't know how I know how to do it. I just do. So I had people ask me if I wanted to teach them, and I don't know how I would teach you. So, yeah.
Interesting. With it being constant, does it get intrusive for you in your day-to-day life ever?
No, not at all, actually. I don't, maybe it's just my attitude about it. I have no idea. I used to think I wasn't very empathic. I really thought that. And I have people all the people that know me, oh, you're empathic. I'm like, yeah, but I just don't care. I can walk into a room and nothing is going to impede me from enjoying myself. So I just don't take things on as much. I think I have a little bit of with these, we'll call them entities, has never been beholden, a partnership. And so if they have something that I need to know, they don't come in and go, Nea, you need to, maybe if I was about to get in a car accident, but it's a lot more subtle than that. And I just don't like, I don't have those, what is it, Long Island media moments very often where like there's no beating down my door. Like she's the one, she can get my message to the woman over there, fondling the fruit. That's not my experience. Although I have been in lines and felt the nudge and I followed the nudge when I feel real like, is this the right thing to do? And I always ask permission and I always honor it. Like, are you interested in receiving this message that's coming through? And sometimes the answer is no. And I let it go. I give no more energy to it because people have the right to decide. And yeah, my gift isn't a permission slip to be intrusive myself. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, do you have any other questions before I keep going?
I think I just have one question about the conversation we're having right now, and that is, do you feel like that's something I really struggle with, is taking on other people's energy and like feeling it in my own body and truly like letting it ruin my day or my time or something like that. So do you feel like the Teflon armor that you mentioned is a result of boundaries that maybe you have gained from experience like in the corporate world or in your past in some way? Or do you feel like it's more like a personal characteristic that you have?
Oh, that is a great question. I would say probably all of the above. I mean, sure, like traumatic childhood, absolutely. Because I think growing up in the US is traumatic. Seriously, like we have, like however you want to look at it, we have a lot of, and the 80s were not great. I think it's a really good question. I think the piece for me is it's not so much that I'm pushing out as much as I'm working with people. Sometimes it's almost like I can step into their experience, but they're not pushing it on me. They're inviting me in. Kind of like a vampire. That sounded really funny. Anyway, I don't know where that came from. I'm laughing about that, but they're inviting me in to have this experience. It's almost like I can try on their life for a minute. Like I feel it in my own self. But when other people are having their experience, I sense it, but I'm always asking the question, is this mine or is this for me? Is this mine or is this for me? Is this mine or is this for me? And I teach this to my kids. And I teach this in classes that I have, is like, because one of the challenges when we're empathetic and when we are sensitive is that one of the reasons we're constantly pinging into a trauma response. We want to prevent trauma. So our radar is up. And so when we're feeling people, we're feeling them in order to know if we're okay. And sometimes we don't trust that we're okay if we aren't feeling it. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
I think I've developed that piece for myself where I'm like, I don't need to feel your stuff to know that I'm okay. And that's just through lots of practice and lots of conscious choice.
Yeah, I think that's a really great practical tip of, is this mine? Is this for me? Just kind of, once you pose those questions, it allows your brain to kind of go off of autopilot and you have to think through that response, which you can then feel in your body. Yeah.
And there are times you don't know. It might be both, but then you can say, well, I'll tend to my side of the street. It's amazing how bringing it to the conscious level shifts our behaviors over time. It's not an immediate, like, I wish it was. Oh, I wish there was just some, key sentence you could have and everything got better. But that practice is powerful.
I have to wonder too, with just how much this has to do with womanhood and motherhood, of women are taught from an early age that we're caregivers, that our role is to care and our role is to be selfless and our role is to care about everybody else. And so what kind of person am I if I can just not care? Does that make me a bad person to like not take on your energy, to not like feel your pain, to not be overly invested and let myself go for you? So it's a really fascinating thing to think about. And in my personal experience, I don't think that makes me a better or worse person to be able to take care of myself. That's that's probably the number one thing I try to, is my goal to relate to women right now and to moms right now, is that taking care of yourself isn't a bad thing. Your
Right.
needs go alongside with the needs of others. They're not in competition. They're collaborative. But it's just fascinating to think about that as, you know, how much are we doing that because we feel like we have to, you know?
Yeah. Well, we don't have a lot of good, we're just starting to get some modeling that, and I think the kids that are growing up now are having a very different experience growing up. And we're learning that, there's good and bad in everything. We're constantly teetering. I remember my great grandmother, who I spent a lot of time with. She was a teacher. She was a fourth grade teacher. And she said, oh, now they're back into phonics. And then it's read as you go. She just said, it swings the pendulum. The key is, can you meet the child where they are and help them the way that works best for them? And she said, it's not really about the pedagogy. It's not really about the dogma that we buy into. It's really about who am I and how am I choosing to be in this moment. And the more that we can, and that I think is what you're talking about being a mom. Like, who do I want to be as a mom in spite of what the world's telling me a mom is, or my ideals around that? And how are we bumping up against that? And where's our measure? Where's our measuring stick? It's so hard. Like I get like choked up thinking about it, because I have my bad mom days, I call them, where I'm like, I'm the worst mom and the bad mom. And I'm like, yeah, but me as a bad mom is still a pretty good mom, because my kids all know they're taken care of. They know they're loved. They know I've got their back, and they know that I'm all in with them. If I make a mistake, they got that. That's
Yep.
I mean, so
yeah. And you are the measuring stick, that right there is making you the measuring stick of saying these are my values as a mom. And as long as I'm doing these things, then 80% of the time, that 20% isn't, is not bad. So I just wish we could all be like, hey, I see you doing your best. And yeah, your choice was different than mine, but I know you put a lot of thought and intention into that, and good for you. Like, let's just do that ourselves. But side tangent. My biggest.
I just want you to know, I think what you're talking about is absolutely relevant to even what we're talking about, that we all want, when we are seeking validation, we are always poking a hole in the bottom of our own cup, because we're always looking to be filled up from outside of ourselves. And so being your own measuring stick, filling up, it doesn't mean, I was just talking about this last week, is that we always think like fill your own cup, that it has to always be full. It has to be full to overflowing. I would just like you to be able to fill up like a third of the way on the regular. Like if you could do that, you can get through your day. But if we're always on empty, if we're always seeking, this outside validation, and that gets into the work that I do when people come to me for answers. So I'm both a coach, which is I trust that you have all your own answers, and then people come to me for answers. I'm like, I still trust that you have all your own answers. So how do we work in that place is that it's here to help you see, probably in a lot of cases, what you already know, and help hold space for you and hear things in a different way. Hold up a mirror, repeat what you're saying, hold a different energy so that you can behold the greatness that you are, instead of me being just one of those people who's, simultaneously poking a hole in the bottom and filling you up. It's not a good thing.
That's so well put. The research shows that 62% of women have experienced episodes of mom rage because they have unmet needs. And so the resentment is there. And what, lesser of two evils, I don't know. But that's my goal, is to help moms feel happier in motherhood. And motherhood's so messy. So messy.
It is.
Sometimes
it is. It's an emotional space. The word mom is emotional. The word mother is emotional. It carries with it a lot of energy, old, new, and possible. I get it, because I feel it every time we talk about it.
We're going to start crying now. Yeah. Do you think your gift indicates about like the world and the world we live in and beyond?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there are a lot of people who have thought about this recently, because there seems to be a lot of people channeling now. There are a lot more like when I was growing up, it was very rare. First of all, there was no internet, right? So you'd hear about it through magazines or through an interview on Oprah or something like that, or at the time Phil Donahue. Let me date myself. Does anybody know who that is? You can Google it.
Okay.
So there would be conversations about, what is channeling at that point. Very rare to hear about it. It was very mystical and very weird. And now with the internet, we have so many people. And I think that the gift is really, I think we're all receiving information and learning to trust ourselves. I will say that intuitive gift is a gift mostly for ourselves. So I will tell you that it's helped me to be a better person. I think when I do the work, when I leave my body, I think there's some sort of residue that is left in my being that has helped me to be more heart-centered, be more gentle, be less reactive, because I don't recognize the person I was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It seems like a different person. And I don't know that I've done everything, said about a certain methodology to change that. It's just I've been changed. So in that way, I think it impacts the world. I will say that there's an intuitive gift, or people who are doing this work, that sometimes it becomes license to negate the other person's lived experience or to negate their wisdom. Because I have a gift, I know more than you do. That is something that the more that I do this work, the more that I realize that is just, that's a different way that ego and power show up in a way that's corrupting to the spirit. So I just pay very close attention to that when I'm working with people. And I have to trust that you always know what you know, that your experience and your readiness has nothing to do with where you are in the scheme of awakening. It's really, what are you ready for today? And does this fit? Is this aligned? Just because I know it, it doesn't make it more true or more real or more valid than your own lived experience. So I think that leads to a softer, gentler way of being and more compassionate way of living, if that makes sense.
I actually just had a very similar conversation with a group of women who are on their own healing journey earlier this week, and we talked about how a lot of times these healing paths can lead us towards the person that we're meant to be and the person who's supposed to share our truest, most authentic gifts with the world. So I think that just makes perfect sense. I love it.
Yeah.
Has it changed your view on the afterlife, or is it always, since your mom was already in this line of work, were you kind of we hang around, spirit is there?
Yeah, funny. So my mom didn't really end up doing this line of work so much, but she knew about it. And I feel spirit. I feel like our loved ones around us. And I think, I don't know what the afterlife is. I don't know. I think I've gotten, the longer I've been doing this, is probably going to sound really crazy, but probably the more agnostic and more maybe even atheistic I've become. That really, I feel like the most important thing we have right now is the present moment, and to be here now. And when I focus too far in the future, even into the unknown of what happens when I die, I lose the joy in this moment, the possibility in this moment. And when I'm spending way too much time focused on the past, or who I should be, or who I should have done, all the regrets, if I put myself there, then that sucks out the energy of the possibility in this moment and who I'm becoming. And so I don't know where I stand on that 100%, but I will say that I really am a much more compassionate person about where people are in how they understand the world, because it is a complex thing. And I like to dance on the edge, always asking, I wonder. So that pushes me into places that some people don't ever in their life want to go. And I don't drag people there with me. I really think it's what is right for you now. And that will reflect in everything that's shown to you.
Last question before we go into, if you have an answer to this, if you don't, it's fine. But do you have any, like a really crazy reading or crazy experience that you've had that sticks out to you?
I had something I was thinking about, but it's kind of, the funny thing, I don't know why I'm going to tell you this. Like there are things, there's one time when I first started, so I was telling you about being the turnstile of spirits. And there was one time that I was channeling someone's spirit guide. And at the time I was very close in because I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I don't know what. So my consciousness was like right there. So a lot of times I would say I was probably still in my body a little and sharing my space because I'm like, I don't know who you are and I don't know what's going on. And I was so nervous. But there was this energy, like this woman's spirit guide was huge, and came in and started insulting my body about how small it was. Like, what is this? And starts patting this body, like how small this is. And I didn't know whether to be like insulted or really happy that I was small. I remember after, and that stays with me so much because I remember the thickness and this entity felt. And there have been times where I've channeled archangels, and the first couple of times, like the feeling the wings, like out of, like in my physical body, like it hurt my upper back. Like I could feel the strain on my physical form. And I was like, and I'm like, maybe it's psychological. Maybe I'm imagining all this. Who knows? Maybe there's a tumor in there that's causing all this. I have no idea. But these are the jokes that I tell myself. I'm like, we're going to find out. They're going to do an autopsy on me someday. It was all a tumor. Like, I don't know. But, you gotta, like, where does this come from? So, yeah, that experience, the interesting pieces that I've had. There was one other piece, and I'll tell this really quick because it's probably one of the most profound. It's not a weird experience. But I came back one time, I was in a room, I was channeling to a group of about 40 people. And I came back and it was like I was lingering there for a while because I saw, but all I can explain is everyone's self. And it is so beautiful. Like still to this day, it was so like, imagine just like this golden and white light and just this energy, this effervescent but big energy just moving and undulating, and this whole room lit up and I could see everyone. And I had this moment where it's very emotional. I forgot how emotional this is, but where I realized that if that's what they look like, that's what I look like. And it was like ever since that, like my love of who I am shifted in that moment. And my love of humanity expanded so much in that moment because it wasn't your problems. It wasn't your personality. It was just this beautiful light. It was really lovely. Probably what keeps me doing this is those moments where I just get to witness people's light and who they really are. It's really wonderful.
That's wild. And you know what's back to a science brain thing, there's research that is showing that our consciousness may not be contained in our bodies. It may actually be like an external field, which would kind of align with that, which is crazy.
Yeah. I love research. I love that you're telling me, you're right.
I read that a while ago. I was a whole quantum physics article, and I was I read the abstract, and I was like, okay, I'm going to stop there because I don't think I can.
You might not come back. You become a cork. It'll be it. That'll be it.
Pretty much, yeah. Just melt away. That's so beautiful, and just I can't imagine what that would have felt like.
It was sitting here still thinking about it. It was a poignant moment in my life.
I feel like if that happened to me, I would definitely have the initial reaction that you had of like I've had those weird meditations where I'm like, okay, like I'm good. Except for that one that we talked about where I was meditating and I got that message and I was like, give me more. Like I wanted, I felt it so strongly, but yeah, that's just so, it's got to be so strange to experience things that the world at large doesn't recognize or doesn't understand.
Yeah. And yet, not to get too philosophical, but we don't understand most of what's happening.
Yeah.
And we're usually making up stories about what is going on in our world anyway. And so I think we're closer to being able to make room for things that don't make sense, that don't add up in our world. And we go, oh, maybe, and so I think people are a lot more open than they used to be, a lot more open. And even though the world seems like it's shutting down in some ways, I'm like, it takes a lot more pressure to hold something in, or down. And we're a culture of oppression in this country. So, as people start to expand into being themselves and being more wholly themselves and bucking the norms, I have quotes around the air quotes, mom quotes, that need for that pressure, we feel it more. So we just have to find the willingness to keep growing.
So we are going to switch into a reading with Nea. She's going to be reading Emmy and I, and we had the discussion off camera whether we should do a reading or a full channel, and we decided that on the podcast we will do a reading, but Nea is going to record a channeling for us, and we'll have that available for you guys to watch after this podcast if you want to go see that. So Nea, can you tell us a little bit more about what it looks like? You kind of give us a rundown off camera again, but how you bring through and how you want us to help direct you.
Absolutely. So the way that I work is in these I call them clarity sessions for a reason. They're not here to tell you what to do. I'm not a psychic, but there are insights that come in that will help support you in who you are and your best self. I also don't call myself a medium, but every now and then someone shows up, and I will describe them to the best of my ability and bring forward messages. In these sessions, it's really about your highest good. I don't feel that drama and trauma help support people. It reinforces what you probably already know. And I'll lightly touch on why things might be a certain way, but it really is about who are you today and where do you want to go? What does this look like? Because if we spend time in the trauma, that's only serving to prove that I know what I'm talking about. It doesn't really help you move forward. So that's how I work. And then I said, if anyone ever came, like if there was a message that came through, I hold such a high energy. I'm like, no way, we're not going there. There's no drama allowed in my sessions. I just don't think it's necessary. It's not where I find people are able to move. The other piece I will say is that I always want to leave people not only just with some information or some insight, but hopefully an action. Like, what do you want to do with this? So great that you got that. What does that mean for you? Do you need more of something, if that makes sense? So I'll just start by asking, how can I best support you two today?
Who should go first?
Emmy, this is your birthday podcast, so you go first.
Emmy, it's your birthday!
Yes, when
Sorry,
this
Scorpio
releases, it'll be my
lady.
birthday. Yeah. Okay, so ever since I had hyperemesis with my fourth pregnancy, but third child, I was really, really sick for 14 weeks, and I was basically on bed rest for that full time. And I feel like I had a lot of muscle atrophy during that time. Like, I became weaker and weaker. And I feel like specifically my heart became a lot weaker. And so I've had some different spiritual readings now that have brought up this idea that maybe my heart is a little bit blocked, maybe there's a heaviness there. And so my question is, the thing I would like guidance on is how to go about healing my heart, both physically and spiritually, since I feel sort of like this weakness in that space.
Are you open to having us check out your physical and energetic form?
I'm open for anything.
All right. I assume so since you asked the question, but we don't do anything invasive here. So the first thing I want to let you know that came through loud and clear is that I don't know that you're necessarily blocked in your heart space. I think what's happening is I think it's easy to see it kind of as a block, but I feel like you just don't trust the physical heart. I feel like you're having like some doubt around that, and that's showing up as like you're pulling attention away from the heart because it makes you uneasy, which I totally understand. I don't know that I'm not getting that your heart is necessarily weak, but I think it's about rebuilding. This is going to sound so simple, but it's really, I think it's about rebuilding your relationship with your heart, with trusting it And I feel like the things that you need to do that make you uneasy, like more physical activity. And it reminds me a little bit, this is coming in like people after they've had a heart attack, like especially married couples, you know, when do we have sex again, right? When can we do this? But it's not, you have to try. You have to be willing to push yourself, that you remember how good it feels to trust your heart. And I think mostly what you're experiencing is up in your head, kind of creating this block. And for whatever reason, did you used to dance?
Cheerleading for sure. I used to do a lot more dancing just around my house and with my kids and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I used to do actually a lot more physical activity, but I feel a lot of resistance towards that.
Yeah. Well,
Ever
for
since
good
it
reason.
happened.
Yeah, for good reason. I feel like just start dancing around the house. Like get your heart rate up. You don't have to do calisthenics. You don't have to do, cheerleading routine for 20 minutes. You don't have to do anything like that, Emmy. I think you finding the joy in movement again is really important. Like you moving is like, there's a direct connection to joy for you. And I think music is really a source for you in accessing that. And the fact that the kids could help, be part of that, that's great. But I think for you, treat it like you're dating your heart. Like I'm taking you out on a dance date. We're going to see how you do. We're going to see if you can keep up, like get a little sassy with it. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think the more fun you can bring to this, I think you have a really big heart. And I think that is not where you're blocked in your energy centers. I would say the bigger thing is you tend to overthink everything. So your mind is always going. And now that you're worried about your heart, you're not dropping into your heart space very much. So you're up in your head thinking about your heart. And the more you can kind of allow yourself to get back in your body, the more you're going to start to feel more in balance and more like yourself. And it's okay. You have resistance. Just go, I have resistance. So what? I'm still going to do it.
Yeah, that's
just
a really
like
good point.
your children have resistance to going to bed at the right time. Still doesn't mean that, they're not going to go to bed at the right time. We have to work through the resistance, right? So yeah, I want to take all that burden off of you and just get down to like, oh honey, like just boogie. Just boogie. And yeah, I think that's great. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, perfect sense. Yes.
Because you've got big heart energy, like no problem. I don't feel like that's blocked. I do feel the mental thing. So meditation, breathing, yoga, if you're willing to do that, I don't know, but find something where you can get to a mindful practice that begins to quiet this noggin, because it will talk you out of everything.
Yeah, I think just the giving myself permission that like nothing bad is going to happen if I move, or if I move a lot, or if I move vigorously, like it's going to be okay.
Well, I can promise you this, if you don't move, you're actually doing more damage. Right?
Exactly.
So this is like, it's time to, like, the story is not matching reality. So
Definitely.
we got to flip that. Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to hear how that goes.
Love it.
Yeah, you bet. That was just, it came in so loud and clear. I'm like, oh, let's take away that. It's good.
Yay. For you, Sam.
Already. Do you have any other questions?
That was the main one I came with. I think, yeah, I just want like the one takeaway, like the easy thing that like I can move forward with, and I don't want it to get muddled. So yeah, I feel like I'm good.
All right.
And unless there's anything that you like notice or
something just came through, and I know it's your birthday. I know I got a clue that your birthday is when this is going to air, but I don't think it is your birthday as we're recording this, right?
Right.
So you don't really celebrate usually. Is that correct?
I would say we don't like have like a big party or anything like that, but we have like a small family celebration usually.
Yeah, I think maybe this year there's like I feel like you've been, and you can tell me if this is way off, but I feel like you've been going through a lot the last couple of years, and it feels like you're saying yes to you more, like you're stepping into something for yourself. I feel like it would be really good for you to think about like a small group of friends coming together and really celebrating who you're like, what you're saying yes to in this next year. It doesn't, I know family is such a core piece for you. I can feel that, but I also feel like there's a part of you that's ready to expand into a friend group again in a way that you haven't for a while. Does that hit what I'm right?
We just talked about that.
Okay. We did not have this conversation beforehand, just so everybody knows. So I feel like this could be like one of those moments that is a benchmark moment where you are doing the inviting, you are creating this space. And yes, it's your birthday and everybody else should do this for you. But the fact that you are creating something where you're saying, I'm taking a stand for this in my life, I'm making space for this in my life, is something that would literally change the trajectory of the year ahead, I think, for you.
Okay, that's something to think about.
Yeah, definitely not a should, but I feel like it's an opportunity that's hanging out here.
Yeah, that's something I literally never would have thought about. That would have never crossed my mind. So the idea of it feels very freeing and fun, exciting.
Yeah, kind of goes with the dancing. Like I feel like everything for this year is lighten up it.
Story of my life.
And it's hard, right? Because it's so easy to focus on family and all the things we're supposed to do and the shoulds and all of that. But this is one of those times where for you, so I'm not an astrologer, don't play one on TV. Don't really know that much about it, to be honest with you. But I feel like sometimes astrologically things are lined up where the winds are in your favor.
Mm-hmm. I definitely
Does that
feel
make sense?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like right now. It feels like the winds are in your favor. So literally all you have to do is set your rudder and put the sails down and you're all set, or up. I guess they'd be up. So get my metaphor right. But
Perfect.
yeah.
I love that. That feels perfectly aligned.
Okay, great.
Love it. Thank you.
Yes. I love that
fun.
for you.
Yeah. So how about you, Sam?
I just feel really giddy over here. Hearing so happy for you. Does that not like echo back that conversation we had like last week-ish? Do you remember that, Emmy?
Totally.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I
don't know if I have any specific questions. I guess I'll kind of ask the same thing as Emmy did, if anything's coming through first, and then I can think on that.
Hang on. So I'm going to ask this random question because I don't know if it's literal or sometimes I get images and it's like, is it literal or is it not? So have you guys been thinking about moving?
No. Well,
okay.
No.
Okay, good. All right. Then I think it's figurative. Like, I think that, because this is a definite like moving thing. But I think what it is, I think there's a shift in perspective that's coming in for you, that what I saw was furniture rearranging. And I don't think it's literally furniture rearranging. I don't think that's what it is. It was chairs specifically. And I think what I'm seeing, like when we move things, what we get when we move chairs to the other side of the room, well, when we sit in it, we get a new perspective. I feel like you're in the same container. And I have a feeling this has to do with work-life balance. And I feel like you're looking at things one way and feeling kind of blocked, or like you can't find the easy button that you're like the clear path forward. And I feel like as you're rearranging right now, and don't be in such a rush to get it right immediately, but to try out different arrangements with the furniture as your thing, which is try on different perspectives with what work-life balance means for you. What I'm getting really strongly is how important it is that your favorite seat is always facing the window, the big picture window. Isn't that funny? That sounds so profound in my brain. Maybe it doesn't to you. But it feels like wherever your favorite seat is, whatever that chair is, that you always have a great view of the big picture. Because you tend to get stuck, probably focused on managing and the what do I want to say? Like the structures and how the room lines up and the colors and all those details. But really, when you have a pic, like where you can see out beyond the room, you are the happiest. So I think this is a metaphor for what you're creating, and not to get so bogged down in the detail stuff. Not that you don't do it, but that you don't get bogged down.
Yeah. I think what I'll add to that is seeing the big picture is easy for me. Like I can see my vision for 3-5 years from now. I'm like, this is what I want things to look like. And then when it comes to taking the steps, I get overwhelmed because I see all the, like, Emmy knows this. I'm very like, well, what do I do with this small decision? Like I need to get this one right and then this one right. And I have very much been kind of just throwing a bunch of coals in the fire and seeing what happens recently. And it's coming easier than it has before to put myself out there and do something that I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it makes any sense, but perspective shift kind of feels right to me when you say it in that way.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful what you're saying. And we oftentimes get stuck in the idea of right and wrong decisions. And the pivot that I would invite you to is shifting from right and wrong to, is this keeping me where I am, or is it taking me in the direction of my vision? Just those two things. Even if it ends up being a dead end and it takes you you're still further ahead and you learn something that allows you to keep going forward. Does that make sense? So there's no right or wrong as much as there is just, is this forward? Does this pull me in that direction? Because right and wrong can keep you spinning.
I think that leads me to a question.
Okay.
I've had a lot of, because I'm doing a lot of things, I have a lot of stuff coming up. As you know, my journal and day planner is getting published and all of this. I feel so much resistance, especially at night, of just I feel like my life is going to change. I feel like my day-to-day is going to change. My responsibilities are going to change. Life is going to change. And at night I lay in bed and I'm like, do I want this reality? Am I going to be able to do this? Is it going to be worth it? Am I doing all of the right things? Am I doing all of the things that align with this? I love this podcast. I love making YouTube videos. I love working on content. I love this journal and day planner, but it's a lot. And with the family that I have and I want to grow, can I do it all? Is this make sense? And so I don't know if you can speak to that resistance. If I don't know
think it's resistance.
Is.
I think it's normal.
Okay.
That's not resistance. That's holy shit. Right? So
mute myself.
Oh, sorry. Is that okay that I said that?
Whispering is fine.
It's not we make up all these stories. We put all this pressure for feeling what we should feel. Right? Are you uncomfortable? Yeah. Do you know exactly what's going to happen? Mm-mm. So here's what I would say is, you said, I have my vision 3 and 5 years out. Let me ask you whether your vision includes you being the mom to 2 and having a balanced life. And if it doesn't, you need to go to the vision and start shaping that to look the way you want, because now all the decisions that'll come up, as they come up, you go, does that line up? Nope. Does that line up? Nope. Or, oh my gosh, this is easier than I thought. It will open up new ways for you to see, because you're telling yourself the glasses that you're putting on to see with. Instead of you being less, having less, you'll have more. And for you, I think there are certain things that are pressure points. I'll say it this way, pressure points that you put on yourself about what success, about what things need to look like, about timing. And part of it is what has made you successful in the past. So that's looking backward. Now we have to look at, what is your future self telling you about what's going to make you successful going forward? Does that make sense? Because there is within you a whole new way of being. And I think the hard part is this feeling like I'm always going to be losing out. I'm not going to be the best mom. I'm not going to have the time. I'm not going to do this. Something's going to lose. And is from a mindset where your resources have been limited. Now let's pivot it to 5 years from now. What does she know that you don't know yet? What resources open up? What possibilities are there? Like, why do you have to do it the way you thought you did? Maybe there's a better solution that affords you freedom. Does that make sense? So like, I just like, as I sit here, I'm like, it's all good. It's all good. And you will probably make some mistakes. So like, embrace that, because that means you're getting closer to doing it the better way. Huzzah. All is good. You're good.
Okay.
And as much as you have feelings where you feel resistance, let's call it threshold of knowing instead. I'm to the threshold of what I know. And my choice is, I'm going to stay in what I know, or I'm going to push past it and just take a risk, right? So you have been exercising in new ways that allow you to push past that. In little ways, you're doing it in spite of what you're being told, in spite of what other people are telling you. And so that's like, for you, there's a new language that needs to emerge that matches the person that you're becoming, because you're really past focused when it comes to how can you handle everything. Does that make sense? And so it's like, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? How can it be easy? How can it be fun?
That's something I've actually been telling myself a lot lately. It's like, it doesn't, especially with parenting right now and with the things I'm putting out right now, I've been more like, it is what it is. Like, you put it out there, you feel good about it, you let it go, you just do, and you do. And that's what I write that's my intention most days, is like, just keep moving. And it has made me feel a lot more equipped to go with the flow than ever before. I've never been a go with the flow person. I've always been a give up on myself right as I'm right there. Like that song I think I told you about, Nea, the one that says, I'm passionate but fickle. It's like, as soon as I feel like I'm on track, I'm like, yeah, but I can't do it. And this is the first time in my life I'm like, yeah, I can't do it, but I'm going to try. Or maybe I can. Like, it's like, I'm changing that script on my own. I'm not having external people tell me that I can as much anymore, which has been crazy and different, but that feels really aligned, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Oh, it's just beautiful. Like, the phrase that I often will tell people, like, grab the phrase, up until today, I didn't believe I could. Up until today. So you put put the line in the sand, and now you're on this side of it. Right? Up until today, I didn't think it was worth trying. But today I'm trying, right? Like, so now you have your benchmark. Now you can bring the past up, but you can see how you're doing things differently. This is big. And when you think about what you're saying yes to and what you're opening to, this is so much more than the journal and you're breaking a pattern. You're breaking a pattern that is going to, like, you'll look back and go, gosh, remember when I thought that was the biggest thing I would ever do? Do you remember when I thought that was so overwhelming? And you'll look back and just be like, gosh, wasn't I funny? Wasn't I funny? You know what I mean? Like, goodness. And that was such a non-issue. It was such a non-thing. And now I'm doing this. And that's the voice of that person, that woman, that version of you living 5 years from now, that she's whispering right now to me, to you, to say, start listening to me. Start coming to me and ask me what I know.
I'm going to laugh because I'm going to cry. So that was really powerful. Inappropriate reactions, but wow. Yeah. I think I have one last question. I mean, I was going to ask about the podcast. Do you want to ask anything else, Emmy, before I do that?
No, go into it. I think so. Yeah. Great.
Actually, are meeting after this call to talk about the future of the podcast and where we want to take this and any other collaborations or products or things we want to do to go along with this. I don't know if you have any sense of what areas we should lean into, stay clear of.
What's the aura of our podcast?
Gives you? Yeah.
Can you take the temperature on that?
Obviously, no, I do. I think there's like a really, there's like such a good, and when I say pink, I'm not talking about girl pink. I'm talking about pink, which is the energy of unconditional love and the vibration of Mother Mary. So if you think about Ascended Master, Jesus's mother, that energy of the Divine Mother moving through this podcast. I think a couple of things is, I think you're just beginning. And so there's a phrase that I've heard that popped into my head just now, which is don't give up before the miracle happens, which is like out of 12-step stuff. So I don't know why I'm like, don't give up on yourselves before it starts to click. And I do think collaborations are a great idea. I think it's about really seeing who your audience is and connecting with different places that moms are. Like, I will tell you that there is, what was it that, Emmy, you told me the name of what you experienced while you were pregnant. What is that called?
Hyperemesis.
Okay. Up until last week, I had never heard of hyperemesis. Now, I've had 2 babies. I'm old, right? So I've lived a long time. I know lots of women, never heard of it. In the last week, 5 women. No joke. I'm like, what is this thing? What is it? And everybody's talking to me like everybody knows what it is. I'm like, I don't know what it is. Tell me. And so I think it's figuring out how to get in front of more people and to start sharing information that everybody thinks everybody knows, but maybe they don't, and how they can support. I think there are ways to think about motherhood, both in past grandmas. You know, you're talking mostly about moms, but how can grandmas support their daughters in being mothers? How are these conversations? So can you find somebody who works with grandmas to come in and talk and about boundaries and about how do you support, what about people who work with kids who, have different challenges and how they work with that, parent coaches. I can go on and on. You're in a really good growth phase. And I think it'll probably be the next year for you to, start to flip it. But I think right now you're still insular. You're still figuring it out. And then it's like, oh, once we start getting going, it's going to tell you where it's supposed to go. Your audience is going to say, we want this. Have you thought about this? They're going to start to reach out and let you know.
Yeah, we've had a lot of that already, actually. So you're right on.
Yeah. I think I don't see this is something that should be in question unless it's about your time and energy, right? But then you might even say, okay, do we need to find a third to be part of this, or a fourth or fifth? I know one group that they do a podcast, there's 5 of them, which seems overwhelming. But if somebody needs time off, they just rotate it through. And I was like, that's amazing. So you may think about how you want to do it in a way that honors everything that you both have coming up in your own lives.
Amazing.
I think we're just going to need a editor or an uploader eventually.
Which is great. That's a higher class of problem,
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah. Years ago, I had somebody who did all my editing that was in Canada, and he did I had a podcast for a little while before I had my surprise daughter. And I was like, what? I had no brain power for a year. So that did not go very far. But I will say that that those people are readily available. And so you can get the support you need as you need it, which is nice. Yay, gig economy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so wonderful. This did fill my cup to the brim today. I don't know about you guys, but this has been just so beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. Before we go, how can our audience connect with you?
Definitely. So Yes Word Coaching is the name of my business. So we move in the direction of yes, and I believe that yes is the language of the universe. It always is answering us with a positive experience. So we have to be careful what questions we're asking. So you can reach me at yeswordcoaching.com, and that's where you can find out about one-on-one sessions, group sessions, and any events I have coming up.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts, Emmy?
No, this was really, really fun. Thank you so much, Nea. It was really fun to meet you.
Oh, it was wonderful to meet you both. This was delightful. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for listening to the Becoming Mama podcast. For all of our socials and websites, you can check that out in the description. Like I said, I will link Nea's stuff below as well. If you'd be willing to give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, that helps us out a ton. Also, leaving a review on Apple Podcast, it means the world to us. You can also share this podcast with your friends, with social media. That helps us as well. And we'll be back next week with a podcast. I don't know what it is, but I will let you know when I do know. As always, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.